Thank you for having me here. I am Jenny Yurko. I am from a lot of different areas of the country, starting in West Virginia, lived in California, and I've been in Denver for almost 3 years. And I have mainly worked in the media and entertainment sectors. Right now, I head up all of our data and analytics insights for brands for North America, which is Canada and the United States, for Samsung Ads. So it was awesome to hear Katie, who works with Samsung Electronics. I work with Samsung Ads, which is kind of a startup inside Samsung. So it's pretty cool, and it's been around since 2015.
Well, Jenny, we are excited to have you with us today. So I have your slides pulled up, so just tell me next slide, and the floor is all yours.
Awesome. Appreciate it. So yes, today we're going to be talking about standing for ethics, and you can go ahead and move forward. I'm just going to give you a little bit about my background. So if you move to the next slide, it'll have my timeline. And I think some of the information on my timeline kind of makes it, or the reason why I really like this topic and standing for ethics. I started with my degree at Xavier University, which, if you know the school, it's a Jesuit liberal arts school where philosophy is part of the curriculum. So some of this ethics information has really stemmed from that. And I worked for the Sacramento Kings. I got my master's in data science and marketing research from West Virginia University and moved over to Comcast Spotlight, which is the advertising side of Comcast. And there was a name change that happened with that company through Effective, and I now work with Samsung Ads. So I am luckily working remotely from Denver for now, and we'll have to move to New York within the next year when things open up. But that's a little bit about my background, and the reason I wanted to make sure that you know where I've worked before is because I'm going to be talking about ethics in the workplace and standing for them. So some of this is connected to the different things that I have encountered during my career. And so if you move forward, really I just want to start with by level setting with ethics and what it means. And today we're going to be talking about 3 topics within this realm. It's going to be first data, leadership, and access. And I'll give you a little bit more color as we go along with what that entails. But if you go ahead and move forward, this is just a quick understanding, the level set on what ethics really is. Ethics are the moral principles that govern our behavior in everything we do, from the most simple, like treating others how you want to be treated, to making decisions that will impact a company's brand image for decades to come. And typically ethics surface when we have choices to make. And truthfully, in the past, women have not always been afforded the opportunity to make decisions in the business world. But now with more female leaders, we can help make these moral decisions and are making strides to provide more transparency to consumers, inspiring young women, bridging the pay gap, and growing closer towards equality for race, gender identification, and those with disabilities. I like to think about this. In 2016, there was actually a study published from Rice University that found that women are more ethical when compared to men. And this study actually observed physicists. And even though they found females to be more ethical scientists, they concluded that it was in ways that potentially limit their productivity and competitiveness when compared to men. So I'm hoping that this will help us bridge that gap as we go through this today. So on these 3 topics, as we move forward, I'm just going to start with the topic of data. And one of the things about our world today is that data is everywhere. I'm lucky enough to work in the realm of data science and research, so I have a new data decision to make every hour, it seems. But even if you don't work directly with data and analytics, coding, or metadata, or any word that gets thrown out as taboo today, you certainly encounter data in your day-to-day life. With the advent of smartphones and smartwatches, we have more access to data about our own data like never before. There are many articles published on the caution of too many connected devices, some linking insurance companies to health data collected from smart wearables to inform pricing and premiums. Access to data is only going to continue to impact our personal lives and our business lives, and the smarter our society becomes, the more we should consider the choices businesses have to make. So there's been many times where I've found myself sitting with data and this data set directly from a client with names, phone numbers, addresses, tying the data back to a product or service that was purchased from a consumer. And there's a question you have to ask yourself as a researcher or anyone making a marketing decision in today's world. Is this right? Even though a client has sent this data over to you directly, does it mean that you should use it? There are appropriate standards in the industry that have been developed for a reason. I could easily scrub the names out of the spreadsheet, or I could remove the compromising data. I know that it might save time and it'd be easier for me, but it's probably not the right thing to do. In these situations, I've had to delete the data set, ask a client to resend me the data, and send it over the appropriate fashion, or load it into a privacy-compliant server and ensure that the data is not inclusive of anything that would be legally compromising. From the client side, this holds up time. It's frustrating to the client, and sometimes it can kind of hurt the relationship. Maybe the client thought I was lazy. Like, it's easy for me to do this task, but this is something that's happened a lot, and maybe they're annoyed and they decrease their spend with the company I'm representing. At the end of the day, though, it's what's right, being data compliant, and I've had this happen countless times. Within the marketing side of the business, decisions that were once made with hunches and opinions, they're now decided by progression charts and evaluated data sets. In this realm, ethics has never been more important. As we all get access to more information, we have to think about how we go about executing it. If you think about it, the data that's out there is more compromising than you think. What if the company who has your smartwatch data decides to sell that information to healthcare companies, and even worse, insurance companies? That data is deterministic, meaning it's true. So shouldn't that legally inform your insurance premiums? The question we all have to ethically consider. Do you use the data that's sent by a client in a targeted email blast, even though maybe those members of this list probably didn't opt in to receive that message? With new CCPA laws, and if you haven't looked into this, it's the California Consumer Privacy Act. The U.S. is changing. They're becoming better advocates for data privacy. But where there's a business need, there's always going to be a potential for corporations to bend the rules. And that's where we as women leaders should take a stand on the moral side of these types of decisions. So that's just one element of data. But if we move forward, another thing that I think is really important today is how we look at leadership. In another instance, while progressing through my career, I've been promoted to various leadership positions. The one situation I'd like to discuss is when I was assembling one of my teams. I had a small team of analysts and was given the opportunity to hire more open headcount, which meant I had really proven myself as a leader and justified the need for more talent to support the business. During this time, I'd inherited some talent internally, I'd hired externally, and I ended up with an entirely female team. But when it came time to hire, I had proactive outreach from leaders, and they said phrases like this: "You should see what male talent is out there. It would be great to diversify the personalities on your team." I've added some extra male resumes into this batch of candidates. I thought you'd be leaning that way. And that was from HR, which was really unsettling. And if you want to move up in this company, hiring a male would be in your best interest. The leaders are going to be looking to see if you can manage a guy as your next step. Those remarks and actions were not just shared by male colleagues, but these sentiments were shared by my female leaders as well. It was heartbreaking and truly put me in a tough place. I had to ask myself, do I hire a male so I can advance? Do I negate their guidance and hire who I think is best? And the worst thought I had is really, can I even lead a male? Are they right about me? Ultimately, I made a choice, and I hired the best candidate for the job. The first person I hired had a diverse set of skills, different than the current team, and they happened to be a female. The second person I hired also brought even more advanced skills to the team, diversifying the team as well as far as our skill set, and they also happened to be a female. I could tell some of my leaders were not in favor of my decisions, but it only took about 6 months for them to see that I had assembled a fantastic team who was more than well poised to achieve the objectives of the business, and they were driving revenue for the company. Ethically, as hiring managers, one is supposed to hire the best candidate to succeed in that role. That may or may not be a male, and in this case, it wasn't. After the first time I was asked to hire a male from one of my open headcounts, I specifically asked HR to eliminate the names of resumes I received moving forward. Truthfully, many businesses aren't doing this. And from the recruiting partners I had, I often still receive resumes with names on them because this practice wasn't always common in our business. So in the initial screening phase, I think this is something that we can utilize that's so important. At its most rudimentary element, it helps eliminate our biases. So I had a choice to make in this instance, and it paid off. In my time during that role, I never advanced in those 3 years, nor was I eligible for any pay raise above the minimum standards, but I knew I stood up for what I fundamentally believed in. The candidate with the best abilities for that role would be the best at that time. We made a massive impact to the way we did the way our company did business, and it was recognized by my indirect leaders at the time, and ultimately it was recognized by my direct leaders who dangled a gender card in the way of my leadership abilities. In my case, sticking to my guns worked out. It made my company try a different exercise when displaying resumes and paved the way for a new group of female leaders. And luckily for this situation, my all-female team was able to see me stand for what I believed in and stand up for them, which will hopefully inspire them in the morality and the decisions that they have to make as future leaders in this world. And then we'll move on to my final element and one of the things I faced with in my career, and that is access. Everyone at this conference has had access to information that someone would like to have, but access doesn't make the data actionable or whatever you have access to actionable. Similarly to earlier in my career, more capabilities have been made available to consumers and companies, and subsequently the capabilities of that data has been assumed. Think about it. We've become accustomed to people listening to us. It happens when we travel to a social media app to find the exact product we were discussing just a day or moments before displayed in front of us. We all know the power of targeting, and with all of the capabilities in today's world, advertisers want to take action. So during the height of the pandemic, at the start of 2020, when the social injustice exhibited in our country was brought to a breaking point, advertisers wanted to take a stance themselves, many producing new thought-provoking creatives or boasting what they had done to help Americans during their time of need. However, there are many levers to pull in the background of those advertisements with targeting and different things you can do. And some advertisers asked me to do just that. I received inquiries from internal stakeholders to make exceptions to target African American consumers on advertising platforms. Clients were asking for it, but did that mean that we should do it? I received a specific inquiry from a client looking to target African American communities with their products. I had to ask myself, why the Black community? In an ethics situation, you need to do some digging to understand the impact of this campaign. What will this do to benefit this specific community? Is there a barrier to entry such as language or access that makes this different, this creative different? In this case, the only reason that the company wanted to target the community was because they had a Black spokesperson featured in the commercial and a stereotype of who they thought would be the consumer of their product. In this instance, we contacted the client and asked pointed questions on the audience they were looking for and established that there would be no need to really target a specific race, and that this product would benefit many cohorts of people. They ultimately decided to run their targeting to a psychographic and not specifically a race. And I was able to discuss with them why that was a better fit, not only for their product, but also a better ethical approach for their brand. This was the first of many targeting requests that I've received that toe the ethical line. Some can be dumbfounding, and as you can imagine, some can also be absolutely infuriating. Even companies like Facebook have laid out policies on ethical advertising. They take a stand saying openly that they believe advertising should be safe and civil, and it should not divide or discriminate. But even Facebook also states in that same briefing that we may not always get it right. This is something that we all have to work to as leaders to figure out how we take a stand for ethics. So the advice I would give in any of these situations is to have a discussion, no matter how comfortable it might be. My conversation with that client when they were asking to target an African American community was difficult, but it helped. Educating yourself and spreading that education is necessary. If we keep these thoughts to ourselves and don't advocate for what's right in the moment, how are we expected to affect change? There's so much power in our voices, and we should feel empowered to use them, especially when we meet ethical crossroads along our path. So to end this, I'll give you some key takeaways from these 3 different situations I gave you. So if you move forward, I have some quick lines. So key takeaways and moving forward. In most cases, practicing ethical behavior cannot be done in a vacuum. Ethics impact you, your brand, but also your team as a leader and the brand for which you work. No matter how you approach ethics, whether adopting a utilitarian approach or a consequentialist approach, there is always an outcome, whether good or bad. And these outcomes will impact your brand as well as the company you represent. So remember when you're about to apply ethics in your future decision-making that standing up is hard. It's difficult to take a stance in general, especially when standing against the grain is not the popular opinion of your peers, coworkers, or your superiors. But when you deeply believe in something, standing up will become easier and easier. And the next slide, be on the right side. Do what's right for the people involved, what's right for your company, and right for the people who look to you as a leader. Making the right decision is always a challenge, but when you err on the side of ethics, you'll land on the right side of your own history. And finally, it's your choice. It's always your choice. When you look back on your decisions weeks, months, years from now, you can be happy with the choice you made. And remember that you chose what was best for all the people and the things that ripple from your impact. As a female in leadership, we have no better platform in history than we do today. Leading by example and standing for what you believe in is not only something you're doing without an audience. There are followers watching, and every ethical decision you make has an impact. And that's what I have to talk to you today. I don't know if anyone wants to talk about their experiences on standing for ethics, but I really hope that this was helpful in hearing some of my experiences.
Yeah, Jenny, that was a great presentation, and it's good to all of us, because sometimes there are things that are unethical that we don't even think about. So it's good for you to give us some thought. So we've had some questions that have come in through the chat. So I'll start with this one. This is a fun one from Nadia. And Nadia said, I'm interviewing for new positions, and those online ethics tests are part of the interview process. Any advice? I'm just afraid of answering wrong and making an error in response.
I think that it's hard when you're looking at these types of ethical tests and hiring, because everything is so subjective in the hiring process. Luckily, there are some objective things in place like those ethical tests that you have. But I think that if you go with your gut and really think about what do you not see on paper, but how do you perceive these people or these new candidates succeeding in that role? Do they bring the attributes that are going to be successful? And then what are the elements you're looking for in someone? Do they need a technical background, or are some of those technical things something you can teach? I think that it's really about drilling down to what are you really looking for, and then who's going to be the best fit long term, not just based on their background, location, because even location can be an ethical boundary in our biases. Do we think that they'll actually move from Arizona to Denver? So those are barriers that we make ethically in our own minds when hiring candidates. So it's a good question. It's a tough one.
Yeah, thank you. So this next question comes from Melanie, and Melanie says, any advice on dealing with my wonderful salespeople that want to blur the lines? I understand they want to make that sale, but they're also doing things against company policy.
Melanie, I hear you. I feel like this has happened so many times for me just in my career, and I think the biggest advice I can give to you is a lot of times some of these inquiries have come to me via email or some communication form that's someone slacking me or something like that. And I think what's best is to pick that salesperson, pick up the phone and call them, have a video chat with them, and just talk to them about why they're doing that and why it maybe doesn't represent your brand or your company in the best light. And ultimately, if they make that decision for that actual client that they're working with, that brand is also going to be tarnished or potentially tarnished. So I think that it's just best to have that educated conversation and I think the only way you can do it is by picking up the phone or having a conversation.
Oh, that's wonderful advice. Yeah, just reach out directly because we get so many things in email. So this is our last question.
Yeah.
This is our last question before I ask you for some final words of wisdom. And Reagan was, she's referring to your slide about access. My company does business with 2 rival clients. What is a good way to educate young staff members? Pre-COVID, sometimes I would even hear them just sitting together at lunch and chatting about work clients. They don't understand that that's non-ethical.
Ooh, that's definitely a good one, because information sharing, especially internally with a company, that's something that you have to represent to your clients and future clients, that you are compliant. So I think if you have approached them and talked to them about it before, I think that the next step is probably talking to HR if it's continuing to happen. I think that the only thing you can do is educate others, and then they make decisions based on that education, or they disregard the rules. And when you have something that's that compromising, especially if they're large clients that are big stakeholders in the revenue for your company, you have to make sure to get in front of it and get the ethically sound choice in line.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for this presentation. I know it gave us all a lot to think about this afternoon. So before we move on to our final presentation, do you have any final words of wisdom for us?
I think that I love this forum and the group of women all gathered here today. I know that earlier on, Katie was talking about like Samsung having Women Plus and a group like this. I hope that everyone's companies have a group of women advocates, but what I love right now is that it's not just women who are here talking about this, it's also men. Men are also involved in the advancement of women, and I think that educating our fellow males about these types of conversations that we're having, the challenges that we face in female leadership, I think that is also what we're here to ethically take a stand on too, is to really bring everyone together in this crusade. So I really appreciate you having me and letting me share my thoughts.
All right, well, thank you for being with us this afternoon.